Okay, Boker Tov. We're going to wait for today. We pick up with on Ayin Dalet, we're daf ahead, and at the next Mishnah, and we are still dealing with the, unusual case. I mean, not like it doesn't happen, but unusual that's not like the standard case of the Torah. But the more curious case or interesting case that the parak has decided to focus on the case of the father and the arus and the groom, who both in partnership in all the vows. And now we turn to a case which we touched on yesterday, and that is the one of the shomer of the yabam. And what is the role of the yabam? On the one hand, it's a carryover of the marriage of the dead brother, and that might have even been a nisuin. It could have been an erusin, but it might have been a nisuin. It requires less, intent to materialize it, to actualize it into a full nisuin. Sex even done without any kavana to create nisuin or whatever it does it because of the zika, and of the remnant of the kiddushin or the transfer of the relationship that now exists between the wife and her brother-in-law that was transferred from her dead husband. At the other hand, right now the nature of the relationship is not the same as kiddushin, because if, for example, if she were to go ahead and sleep with another man, it would not be adultery, it would not be ish. So what? And you could do chalitza, which is much seemingly less of a procedure. Now they make it so complicated, but anyway, than that of a get, right? So is the yabam in a position? Is he needed? And does he have the ability to be part of the hafara together with the father? So that's the question. So let's take a look at the Mishnah. Shomer Yabam, so a woman who is awaiting Yibum. Bein Yabam Echad, bein Lishnei Yavmi. Whether she has two brother-in-laws or one brother-in-law. Two brother-in-laws is obviously more confusing because then who is the one who has? You can't designate any particular one as the one who's in the relationship with her.
So can either then?
Well, thank you. That's what we're going to figure out. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yafer. Rabbi Eliezer says he can be made for you. Now, who's he if there are two? So we'll see.
Maybe either one of them.
Maybe either one of them, right? Okay, but it's also Yafer. It's not that he can be made for. Remember that unless there's a possibility here that somebody considers it to be in the category of nisuin, it would mean he can only be made for together with the father. So, well, actually, let me take a step back and say the following: she was obviously already married because now there's a case of Yibum. If her marriage to the first guy if marriage to the first guy was nisuin, then the father isn't in the picture at all. And then the only question now is, and then the question would be, does the yabam, is it considered like nisuin? Okay, because if it was only considered like erusin, then the yabam would not be in a position to do anything. Erusin without a father is not in a position to do anything. But we're going to be assuming, we're going to assume both possible, but we're going to be assuming also the case where she only had erusin with her husband who now died. So now the father remains in the picture. So if that's true, it might be sufficient that the relationship with the yabam is similar to that of erusin. Okay, right? Because as long as the father remains in the picture, an erusin relationship gives the husband the right to be part of the hafara. But here's the question: whether yafer means if it's her marriage was erusin and the father's still in the picture, and Yefer means that it's like erusin, then all Yefer doesn't mean that his hafara ends the story. It means his hafara is necessary, right? Because if there's a father still, you need the father and the groom. So Yafer doesn't mean, he can be made for and we're done. It means he needs to be made for together with the father. Okay, it actually complicates things. Doesn't make it easier for it to be hufar. Okay, if, however, it's like nisuin, right? Or she was already outside the control of the father, but whatever. Either way, it's like nisuin. Then Yafer means he does it alone. So there's a big question what Yafer means in the Mishnah. It doesn't mean it's like nisuin and he does it alone and then it's the end of the story. Or does Yafer mean that it's like the Yavam relationship is like erusin and he's Yafer together with the father? Okay, but what Rebbe Lezer say one of those, whether one or two Yafmim, they are in some type of a position to do hafara, either like an arus or like a baal. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, that only works if there's one yabam. If there are two yavmim, then they're not, because you don't know who. Okay.
So why can't they both?
Now, well, we'll see, but because we'll discuss that in the Gemara. But presumably they both can't, because anybody. It's not like one of them is, and we don't know which one, right? It's that because it's indeterminate fundamentally at this state, indeterminate, nobody is in a real relationship with her. Okay, it's an indeterminate relationship. It's not that one person is definitely in a relationship, but we just know which of them. Okay, so therefore neither of them are in the position. Now, presumably neither of them are in the position means that if there's a father, the father does it by himself. It doesn't mean like you're stuck. You could imagine like you're stuck. Well, here's the father, there is a husband, we don't know which one is the husband, so we're stuck. No, the whole point is that because it's indeterminate, nobody gets to play the role of the husband, and therefore the father does it by himself. Okay, but if there is only one, then yes, then he is in that role. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva Omer, lo lecha v'lo shnayim. Even if there's only one, he does not have any status, and it's all the father. If it's the case of a father, I'm Rabbi Linzer. I don't get it. He says to Rabbi Akiva, my nisha shekanahu latzmo. When a man marries a woman by himself, he's in a position to be part of the hafara. When heaven has given it to him, which basically means like, it's not even arbitrary. It's not even, God wants it. It's defined by halacha, by heaven. So if God wants this relationship, that seems to be the logic. How much more so should if and you might want to even add, like there's a mitzvah to do yibum and all these types of things. That should be an indication that it's a stronger relationship, and he should have. How much more so should he be in the right to do hafaras nidar? Now you could question that very thing, but you understand the idea within this concept of the world of yibum and yakum she machifa meit, etc. Once this is a situation, it's like if the Torah really wants this relationship to happen. So how much more so should you be in that position? I'm going to go Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said back, no, I don't buy the comparison. If he marries a woman on his own, so there's only him and her. Nobody else is involved. In the case here by Yibum, when it's all done by heaven, there's somebody else involved. There's the other brother-in-law. Okay, in the case of two brother-in-laws. So at least in case of two brother-in-laws, this is not a better situation. Since somebody else can go ahead and do the Yibum, for each one of them, they don't have the same type of relationship. It's not a type of an exclusive relationship. And it doesn't particularly designate them. It could be somebody else. Okay, so therefore, that in the case of two brother-in-laws, it's not, clearly they're not in a strong position. But Amalei Rabbi Yoshua, but then Rabbi Yoshua said back, Akiva, Varecha B'shnei Yavnim. That's good when there are two brothers, two brother-in-laws. If there's only one brother-in-law, then this Kal V'chomer makes sense. Then Rabbi Eliezer's Kal V'chomer makes sense, right? Because then if this is a divinely mandated type of created Zika and a divinely mandated act of Yibum, hey, he should be in a stronger position. Okay, so what do you say if there's only one brother-in-law? Rabbi Akiva said back, no, even if there's only one brother-in-law, the Yabama is not fully given over to the Yabam the same way the Arus is given over to her husband. What does that mean? So the obvious difference for Tekes is about adultery. It's not considered an act of adultery. It's an Isra of Lo Ti'eshes Armeis Achutza, but it's not considered, the nature of the relationship is not as weighty. Okay? It's not marriage. It's not as weighty of a relationship, and therefore, I'm sorry, even one brother-in-law is not in that position. Okay. So let's take a look at the Gemara. So we get it. Rabbi Akiva holds that there's no Zika. Now, Zika, as you might remember from Yevamot, is everybody says, right, there's something there that can be, that has to be like actualized when the act of Yibum is done. But to identify it, to Yesh Zika, that means like we actually give that potential some real weight and say that it's like something, there's a real, there's a real bond there. It really defines some concrete relationship. It's not just some potential waiting to be actualized. Somehow there is actually some actual relationship that already exists. Okay, so that has various nafkaminas. So basically, it's saying, well, one way to conceptualize this debate, you could have said everybody says Yesh Zika, but still, if it's not strong enough to be a case of Eshes and adultery, it's not strong enough to play the role of a farmer, right? You could have said that, right? Fine, there's Zika, but it's still not, like Rabbi Akiva says at the end, at the level of Kiddushin. It might be something, but it's not the same weight. But nevertheless, the Gemara wants to conceptualize it this way. The easiest way to understand is that Rabbi Akiva doesn't really recognize the Zika, any concrete relationship. Yes, there's a mitzvah. Yes, there's an Isra of Lo Tiyeh Shesamei Salchutza, all those types of things, but it hasn't yet defined itself. It's more like a potential and an obligation, unless it's a real concrete relationship, and therefore he's not in a position to do hafara. Now that's interesting because if memory serves, Rabbi Akiva is the one that says Yesh Mamzer Michai Lavin, and that a woman who sleeps with another man and who is awaiting Yibum, the child is a mamzer. I'm pretty sure. I should have double checked. But anyway, so that would be funny to say that side by side with the idea of Yesh Zika, of Ein Zika. But okay, maybe that's just a position about like, I mean, there could be like, it could be, there's an Isser, there's other Yisrei Lavim in the Torah that could, create mamzer that are not about the bond and the concrete bond between the husband and the wife. So whatever you say about the world of mamzerus, he's saying this is not a concrete bond yet between these two parties, and therefore he's not in a position to do hafara. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, so Ella, so that's Rabbi Akiva. It's not a concrete bond. Ella, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua Savar, Rabbi Yoshua is of the position, Yesh Zika. There is a Zika, and therefore there is a concrete bond. You can do hafara, but if there's two, it's obvious why it doesn't work. Because if nobody says that there's Zika if there's two, because then you don't know who has the Zika, right? It's fundamentally indeterminate. El Rabbi Eliezer, my time, Rabbi Eliezer says even with two, what's his logic? Zika ain't breva. Even if there's Zika, you can't determine which one is the one, right? I mean, I guess you could say, well, but, if it's funny, it's a certain rare. You could say, well, maybe, a year from now, when one of them does Yibum, that retroactively we will say he was the one with the Zika. But if all that were true, he should have said it, right? So it seems like even if in the end they both do chalitza or something, So what's the logic? Right now, it's fundamentally indeterminate. Why does any one of them in a position to do hafara? So Amar Rav Ami, Kigon Sh'asaba Mamar, he makes an ukimta in the Mishnah. And he says, you're right. In the basic case that there were two, and then obviously none of them would be in a position. But what happened is one of them did ma'amar. Now you might remember from Yevamos that ma'amar is when one of the brother-in-laws goes ahead and does an act of kiddushin with the sister-in-law. Now that act of kiddushin does not make her mikudeshet. Well, we'll see in a minute according to the Shammai. According to the general assumption, does not make her mikudeshet. Does not make her an Yibum, because fundamentally there's only one real path that works by Yibum. Either sex to make it to make it into a marriage, or chalitza to undo it. Get doesn't do anything d'oraisa, and kiddushin doesn't do anything d'oraisa. But the rabbi said if you can do kiddushin as a way of basically showing, like calling dibs. I'm sorry to use that analogy. Anyway, but like basically saying like a demonstrating your intent. And B, sort of closing out, the option from the other brothers, okay, if there's more than one brother. Actually, it's more than that because, Chazal basically, from when we learned Yevamos, even if there's only one brother, wanted him to do Kiddushin first. You wanted him to sort of, you don't want to just like go straight to the sex, right? You want to sort of, show something that shows like intent and structure and whatever for the relationship. And then you have that, the act of sex, which is the act of Yibum. So Chazal actually wanted this to be part of the process, even if there's only one brother. But that's the idea of Mamar. So if there are two brothers and one does Mamar, then that basically designates him in the position to do the Yibum. And that's what allows him to do it and not the other. And therefore the debate between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer would be a case where there's Mamar. Rabbi Eliezer says it's enough to put him in the position to do Hafara, to designate him. And Rabbi Yoshua says, no, fundamentally, even after Mamar, another brother could jump in and do the Yibum, and it doesn't really fully prevent the other brother from doing it, even though he shouldn't. And therefore, it still remains not enough. That Mamar is not enough to give this person that role.
Wait, I'm sorry. So Eliezer was saying, because when I looked at the Mishnah, it seemed to me that the Shemer Yabam, the two brothers, any one of them can do it.
Right, but the Gemara is not happy with that.
So the Gemara is saying it's not really anyone.
It's not anyone. It's the one who did Mamar. And we're talking about a case where did Mamar. It's not shot in the Mishnah. No question. It's not shot in the Mishnah. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Ella, so the Gemara says like this. Rabbi Eliezer. Now it's not enough to just say you did Mamar, because again, Mamar doesn't have any weight in the Torah. It's only like rabbinic. So why would that be sufficient to give a person the power to do hafara? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer several to Beit Shammai, because he also holds like Beit Shammai. The Amri, Mamar Koneh Kinyan Gamur. The Beit Shammai actually says that Mamar really does something even according to the Torah. What would be an example of that? So if you take a look at the Ran, he spells it out. He says, it's on the next page actually. Okay, yeah, turn the page, the Ran. He says, Mamar kone kinyan gamur. It's like 4 lines down in the narrow lines. Tahavi lekichnusa umatzi paterla begita lobai chalitza. That it really is so consequential that, now we're going to see in a minute, it might not be enough consequential that if she sleeps with another man, it's a shasish. Okay, that might not be, but it does enough to actually create now, there actually is this track. Well, he married her, he did Kiddushin. So now he sort of moved her away from the Yibum track and put her on this more traditional Kiddushin track. And as such, if he changes his mind and doesn't want to be married to her, he doesn't have to do Chalitza. You can actually now
that's
do a
not
get,
our problem these days.
right?
Be held that way.
Well,
Just do mom. Just do mom.
Do Mamar and again.
And again.
What problem? That's hard to figure out how to do Chalitza.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. Anyway, well, we do it. Anyway, fine. So Beit Shammai says that the Mamar actually has some real right to wait. If it allows you now to do a get instead of Chalitza, then that means that it has really defined the relationship. Okay? Now, it might not be a full Kiddushin. We're going to see in a minute whether there's still some other ways that it could get derailed. But even if it's not a full Kiddushin, if it really has now allowed for a different type of a method, now you do get instead of Chalitza and so on, then that really now defines the relationship in a very concrete way. And if that relationship has been defined in a concrete way, then this, even though they're 2 brother-in-laws, the one who did Mamar can do Hafara. Okay, that's what Rabbi Eliezer holds. Where were we? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua would say back, that would be good if there's only 1 Yabam, then you wouldn't even need Mamar. But not with 2 Yamim, even if there's Mamar. Why? Could there be any scenario where the brother could come along, and even after Mamar, the brother could come along and do Bia? Okay, Mamar, again, it doesn't, it's a funny position of Beit Shammai. It's Kone Kinyan Gamur, but it still isn't, Yibum hasn't taken place yet. And it doesn't still close out the other brother. And if the other brother were to come along and do Yibum, it actually would work. And then this guy would now have to give a get. You wouldn't be able to finish the marriage with this woman, even though you did Ma'amar, okay? Or if the other brother even gave her a get, he could go ahead and make her forbidden to you, okay? You, the guy who did Ma'amar. So because the other brother was still involved, even if you actually created something really concrete, it's still not exclusive. You haven't closed out your other brother, okay? And since you haven't closed out your other brother, even though there's something concrete here, you're not in enough of a relationship in order, it's not exclusive, it's not, even if it's concrete, it's not exclusive, and you're not in a position to do Hafara. Okay, so that's the debate. Is Mamar sufficient, even within Beit Shammai, and even with the site of King Gamur, to designate, to put 1 brother in the position to be able to do Hafara? For Rabbi Akiva Savar Ainzi. And then Rabbi Akiva, like we said, he just doesn't coerce any of this. Even with Mamar, even with all of that, there's no real concrete relationship here. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to clarify, right, what this means. I'm sorry. Now the Gemara is going to clarify that even within Beit Shammai, we might not be able to say Kone Kinyan Gamur. That was the one thing that allowed us to understand how it could work according to Rabbi Eliezer. But there's a Rabbi Lazar. It's a little confusing here. The Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer, but now there's a Rabbi Lazar position that within Beit Shammai that narrows the way, that the scope of what Beit Shammai means. So in Yevamos, we have a position of Rabbi Lazar that says the Beit Shammai ain't kone elichot b'tzara. That Mamar is not really kone kinyan.
So this is wrong with
Eliezer
here, right?
Right. It should be, if you look at the side, it says Lazar. Okay. So meaning all Mamar does, you're mistaken. Your desire to identify with Beit Shammai this idea that Mamar is kone kinyan gamor, that really isn't the position of Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai's position really is that Mamar just prevents him from having to deal with the sister wife. What does this mean? Does everybody long for the days of learning Yevamot? And every single day we drew on the board. So let's do it again. Okay. So here you basically have 3 brothers. Okay. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. They're all brothers. Okay. And these 2 are married to sisters. Rachel and Leah. Okay? Now, Shimon dies. Now, he has a mitzvah of Yibum, right? He goes ahead.
But they both do.
Well, they both do. No, except he does it because
he can't.
Achos
I mean,
no.
right.
So he can't. So he's the only one who has a mitzvah of Yibum. Okay? He goes ahead and he does the mitzvah of Yibum, and then Levi dies. Shalom Yisrael. He's already married to the wife's sister. Doesn't have any mitzvah of Yibum with Leah, right? If he doesn't do the mitzvah of Yibum, and Levi dies, then he can't do the mitzvah of Yibum with either. Because each one is Achos Ziku Kasa. Remember that?
Okay.
So because of the Zika, it's like he's quasi-married to each one, and therefore to do Yibum with the other one, it's a quasi-wife's sister, right?
So if you're holding Zika.
Now, okay, let's not worry about that. Okay, so then what if, however, before Levi died, he did Mamar with Rachel? Okay? And now Levi dies. Can he now say, oh, goodbye, Leah. I'm already married to Rachel, right? So quasi-married to Rachel. So Leah just walks away, and I'm going to finish it. And it's not Achuz Kukaso because there's no Zika here because this has already been defined, right? Or do we say that Mamar is only rabbinic, the rice says nothing, and there's really still an equal Zika to both, and therefore he does deal with Rachel, it's still Achuz Kukaso for Leah. That would be the normal position. So Beit Shammai says you don't have to worry about Leah. There's already Mamar. Okay? So one way of understanding that is a very broad understanding. For Beit Shammai, Mamar really makes it like they're already married, and therefore it's Achos Ishto, end of story. That's Kona Kinyan Kamur. But there's a position of Rabbi Linzer that says, Rabbi Linzer says, no, don't take this beyond its narrow scope. All Beit Shammai is saying is that the Mamar is enough to keep Leah out of the picture. Okay? Lidchos Tzara. It keeps Leah out of the picture. Okay? And so maybe you could say it makes it that there's not a Zika to Leah or something, but whatever it does not mean that in generally the Mamar fully makes it as if they're married. Okay, so that's the question. That's the Beit Shammai it all starts with. So if you say read this Beit Shammai in a very narrow local way, we're back to the problem. How can your act of Mamar be enough to put you in the position, over your brother to say that you're really in the position to do the Hafara and you're really the one that has the relationship with this woman? Okay, so let's read that. Well, Rabbi Linzer, the Amar Mamar the Beit Shammai ain't Kona Elitchot B'tzara. It's really not Kona. All it does is it just keeps Leah out of the picture. Michael and Amar. We're back to square one. There are two brothers. Either one of them could do Yibum. We tried to say that Mamar makes it like it's only a relationship with one, according to Beit Shammai. But we're saying that no, there's a read of Beit Shammai that even Mamar doesn't really do anything like that. So what makes it one brother over the other? So Mar says, what are we talking about? So here's the question. Here's the case. The case is not just Mamar. The case is that, let's say, I don't know, one of them was the older brother, okay, and normally they turn to the older brother and expect him to do Yibum, and he's been diddly-dallying, so they bring him, so she's brought to a beis din, and they basically tell the older brother, you've got to go ahead and do Yibum. They're just telling him that wouldn't do enough, right? Because again, that doesn't make a concrete relationship, and the other brother could always jump in and do it. But then the beis din said, look, she's been waiting a year for you to do Yibum. As if he has to, while she's continuing to wait for you to get your act together, you're going to have to start paying her food bills. Okay, Chayav Lamizonot, sort of right. Because remember, this woman doesn't have a husband anymore. She should have been married. It's sort of like when she's waiting for the nisuin more than a year, he has to start paying his own. So now, even though logically there's not a concrete relationship yet, the beis din has now obligated him to pay mizonot. Now, if he Chayav Lamizonot. And this follows Rav Pinchas that we quoted yesterday. Mishmei de Rava, the Amar Kol Hanoderes al Das Bala Hinoderes. That even though halachically there is not yet a concrete enough relationship, she is doing it. A woman has in mind the man who she's going to be living with, and once he's paying for her food bills, she sees herself as in future living with this guy, even though halachically that has not yet been defined, and therefore her vows are considered to be presuming that he's okay with it. Al dato. Now again, I want to remind you of the very important conceptual point that Ron made yesterday, where the Ron said it doesn't just mean like this could work with any guy off the street. Like if somebody comes and says, I don't know, let's say her
You like your-
let's say her
your
rich
dog,
sister, let's not even make it a man. Her rich sister came along and said, you know what? Don't worry, I'm going to come ahead and I'm going to pay your food bill or something for you, right? Or somebody explicitly said, I'm doing this neder al das Seth. Okay, you know, if I don't explicitly say b'tnai that he says okay, then al das doesn't really, says the Ran, doesn't mean anything. He can't stop it from being good. You know, and we're talking within normal halachas. We're not saying, you know, there has to be an act of afar, it has to be the right language, it has to be within 24 hours. What this means, says the Ran, is you take somebody that's already a quasi-husband. Who's a quasi-husband? First of all, the arus, the groom, yesterday, or here the yabam, and you say, if you add to that person who's already quasi-husband, the reality that he's paying the food bill and she sees herself in the relationship with him and about to be married to him, then that would fit in the Torah's category of the Baal. Okay, the Baal doesn't have to be formally exactly the Baal. There are other things that are close enough that already it's a husband relationship, plus other important elements that make it in the Torah's category of the Baal. Really is a Doraisa category of the Baal.
And he did a mama, right? In this case,
it could be he also did a mama. Either way, Basin has certainly designated him over the other brother to be the one to do evil. Okay.
So they would automatically designate the older brother.
Yeah, the normal thing is you go to the older brother. Okay, right. So basically, what he is saying is that you're right. It's still a problem. They're two brothers, but because each brother, they're not strangers. There is a yibum, there is a zika, even though it's indeterminate who. But combined with the fact of her psychological state and the reality that he's paying the bills, that makes him in the category of the Baal, and that makes him in the position to be Nathan. Now, the Ran says the pshat of that is, by the way, remember we used that language yesterday to put the groom in the position like after Nisuin, that he did it by himself, if you remember that yesterday, right? Once you're paying his own note, that's an Nisuin type of relationship. So the Ran says, according to this position, it would be without the father. According to this idea that it's paying his own note and it's like an Nisuin, then he's treated as a Baal, not just as an Aris, and he would be doing it even without the father. Okay, so we have two questions now in the Mishnah. One is, when the Yabam is able to be Mefer, according to those that he can, is he Mefer because it's similar to Egersin, which is suggested in the Mishnah because of the comparison to somebody who marries a woman, Hiknalo Mina Shamayim, etc., seems to all be like a type of a Kiddushin type of a discussion. Is it like Egersin and it's only with the father? Or is it like Nisuin and it's by himself, which certainly seems to be the case here when the Gemara is saying in the case of two, the reason to select one over the other, the reason that one is identified is because he's paying the food bills and it's like already Nisuin. Okay, that seems to be independent of the father. Let's take a look now at the Amud Bet. It's not. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. So now it's going to exactly that line in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says to Rabbi Akiva, a woman that he was kona for himself, he annuls the vows. Okay, so how much more so if it was from heaven? Now, we want to say, how does this fit into the way we suggested reading the Mishnah? If it's going to Rav Ami's read that he was asa mamar, that's the whole scenario we're talking about. So kana la'atzmo, So why do you say to Rabbi Akiva, oh, Rabbi Akiva, this is a stronger because, this was Mina Shamayim as opposed to a case of Kana Atzmo. If the case we were talking about was Yibum plus Mamar, this case is not just Mina Shamayim. This case was also Kana La'atzmo. So, right, it's being described inaccurately. So that's not really such a problem because that just makes this case all the stronger. Right? So the Gemara says, fine. Kana La'atzmo Yedei Shamayim. Okay, fine. You got both. Right? He says, look, this case is Mina Shamayim, and parentheses, plus he also even did his own thing on top of it. And that should be stronger than a guy who just did it himself. All right, so that wasn't such a question. All right, now the Gemara says like this. Tivshot, assuming the read that was Asaba Mamar, not this read about Basin and Mizonos, we're going to focus on the Mamar read of the Mishnah. Tivshot to buy Mamar, to buy Rabbi. You can conclude you should, if that's the read of the Mishnah of Mamar, then you should be able to use this to resolve the question that Rabbi raised. What the question did Rabbi raise? Mamar lebeit Shammai Eresin Oseh Oni Suin Oseh. Assuming that Mamar for Beit Shammai is Kikona Kinyan Gamur, what state does it bring it to? Does it bring it to Eresin or bring it to Nisuin? Now you should say, why does it bring it to Nisuin? I mean, Mamar is an act of Kiddushin, But the fact that it's an act of kiddushin that's building on a relationship that's ready to materialize and to actualize through this act of sex, right? Without even any dust for that and so on. So maybe that actually raises it to the level of nisuin, and it's not just erusin. It's not just an act of kiddushin, right? So what is its status? The nafkamina would be, right, is he chayav mizonos after mamar, all the other questions about are they halachically defined as, as nisua after mamar. So that was Rabba's question. So how are we going to resolve it? Tifsho, let's resolve the nisuin oseh, that mamar actually makes her like a nisua. How will we resolve that? The erusin oseh, if it's just erusin, that's not naramurasa view balam lefir nidarel. So we say, what do you mean that the Yavam can do it? What about the father? Now this Gemara is saying that if you read the Mishnah says Yafer, Yafer, Yafer. The Mishnah doesn't mention any father, right? I raised that question in the Mishnah. Is there also a father here, and so on? But the Gemara is here assuming that the Mishnah sounds like if the Yavam is doing it, he's doing it by himself. So therefore, it's assuming that those that say a Yavam has a status, he has a status like a Baal, like Nisuin. Okay, so therefore say, I know what you could say, we'll say it in a minute, but assuming that since the Mishnah doesn't mention the father, anybody who says the father-in-law can do it does it like a Baal, does it like Nisuin, so this should resolve the idea that if you do Mamar, it raises it to the status of Nisuin, because that seems to be what's going on in the Mishnah, that they're like Nisuin. So the Gemara says no. The Gemara says no. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, my Yafer b'shutfis. No, Yafer doesn't mean by himself. It means together with the father. It means he has the status of an Orus. It doesn't mean he has the status of a Baal. All right? So we're back to the indeterminate, the same it's indeterminate which of the brothers-in-laws is the indeterminate meaning of the Mishnah. For when the Yabam has the status, is it by himself, like a Baal, or is it like an Orus together with the father? That's not clear from the Mishnah. According to the idea that he's chayav mizonos and it makes him like a Baal, then obviously it would be by himself. According to the idea that Mamar is Konekin and Gomer according to Big Shammai, then it's an open question whether according to Big Shammai that would make him like an Orus and he does it with the father, or like a Baal and he does it by himself. We talk like Rabbi Ami, this idea that we're dealing with a case of Mamar. Where do we have this? Here's the bright. It's a Tosefta. Shomer's Yabam, Bein Yabam Echad, Bein Shnei Yavmim. If a woman is waiting for Yibum, whether one brother-in-law or two. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yafer. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Echad V'lo L'Shnayim. Rabbi Eliezer says fine. Rabbi Yoshua says only if there's one, not if there's two. Rabbi Kiva Omer Lo L'Echad V'lo L'Shnayim. Not one, not two. Amar Rabbi Eliezer says Rabbi Eliezer. Uma in Isha she'ein lo chelek ba. So Rabbi Linzer said, Rabbi Kiva, I don't understand it. A normal woman, she has absolutely no relationship to him until he actually marries her, right? That's she halachically complete stranger, and then he does an act of kiddushin. And that woman that Misha Basalushu, so once there's an act of, now you have to understand, the Ran says, because Basalushu, so I would naturally assume to be Nesua, right? But the Ran says if it was Nesua, it would say Nichnas L'Rishuso. Yeah, you have to excuse me. I don't see a big difference between the word nichnas and ba. But anyway, the Gemara is choosing to read this that we're talking about kiddushin. Okay, so a normal woman, he has no relationship to her until he does the act of kiddushin. So once he does the act of kiddushin, she's fully his wife, and therefore he's able to go ahead and do hafara. The sister-in-law that he has a connection to, there's a mitzvah yibum, there's a zika before he actually goes ahead and brings it to the next step. So how much more so should he have that power once she's basal l'rishusah? Now, what's basal l'rishusah? So if basal l'rishusah means he does the act of yibum, then we can't be talking about that. If he does the act of yibum, she's his wife, right? Nobody would be debating it. So what's the stage after zika before yibum, which he's more basal l'rishusah? Mamar. Okay, so that's how we know we're talking about mamar. It says he had already a relationship with this woman before he did anything, meaning zika. Now that he's done something, how much more so? So it must be he's done mamar. Okay, because she still can't be yet his wife. Okay, so therefore, how much more so should he have that ability? So that shows that we're talking about a case of mama. So Amar Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva said back to him, "Look, no, when he did it himself, it's true that before he did the kiddushin, he had no connection to her, but nobody else had a connection to her either. And more to the point, after he does the kiddushin, then actually nobody not only doesn't have one, but nobody can have one. The kiddushin closes out everybody else." So, in the case of Yibum, the same way he has a connection to her, but the brother also has a connection to her, and presumably even after Mamar, the brother can go in and do Yibum. Okay, he's not supposed to, but he can. So you can't compare it, says Rabbi Akiva. It's true, there's more of a connection here, but there's somebody else in the picture. So Amar Lo, Rabbi Yeshua. So Rabbi Yeshua said back to him, Akiva, Tvarecha b'shnei Yavmi. This is all a repeat of the Mishnah. So, right, Akiva, what you're saying is true if there are two brother-in-laws. So you can say it's not exclusive, and therefore neither of them have, even after Mamar, this guy doesn't have enough of a status. But Ma'atam Neishiva Yavam Echad, what do you say if there's only one? Amar Le, he says back to him, Plum Chalachnu Yavam Echad v'shnei Yavmim, Bein Shasa Mamar, Bein Shalosa Mamar. He says, I don't care. One Yavam, two Yavams, yes Mamar, no Yamar, none of that matters to me. Even if it's only one Yavam and he did Mamar, it would not be enough. Why? Okay, why not? One Yavam and he did Mamar, he had a Zika, he did his Mamar, there's nobody else in the picture. Why not? So he says, Uchashar Dvarim Kain Nedarim. Because just like everything else, Nedarim is no different. What does that mean, just like everything else? So the Gemara is going to say, just like when it comes, for example, to adultery, she's not yet fully his wife. If she were to sleep with another man, it would not be an act of adultery. So no matter how strong this connection is, there's Zika, there's Mama, there's no other person around. Nevertheless, she's not his wife yet.
What about the Direct of that Bala? No,
all of that. Okay, certainly if there's no Chiyuv Mizonos, yes, that's only once there was a Chiyuv Mizonos. And therefore, I don't care how much they're in a relationship, before it gets to the stage of Kiddushin, of Eishes and so on, he cannot be made fair. So, with this language, Ben Azai responded to this debate. Woe to you, Ben Azai, Rabbi Akiva, that you did not, attend to Rabbi Akiva and you would have learned from him. Of course, it's pretty funny because Rabbi Akiva's punchline, it's not even so clear, right? It sounds like they have a good case, There's only one guy, he did Mama, he did all of this, and then Rabbi Akiva's response is very terse. It's not clear how he's responding back. So, it's like Ben Azai is saying, oh my God, Rabbi Akiva is so brilliant. Yes, Rabbi Akiva is brilliant, but I'm not sure how here you see it, right? So maybe, I don't know, this is just pure speculation, but maybe what he means is that Lo Shemash at Rabbi Akiva, because if I was, then I would have understood what he meant by his answer. His answer was a little bit too terse. I wish I understood more what he was actually answering and saying back. And if I had attended to him more, I could have understood it better. Okay, that's not normally how the Rishonim explain it. They we say he's blown away with Rabbi Akiva's brilliance and woe that I did it, whatever. Anyway, fine. So that was a debate in the Mishnah. And now the Gemara just spells out, my tani kavasid Rabbi Yomi. How does it support Rabbi Yomi? Tiktani, bein shasa b'mam, bein shalasa b'mamar. Okay, because Rabbi Akiva says, I don't care, yes, Mamar, no Mamar, etc., which shows that we were talking about a case of Mamar. That was on the table, that was part of the conversation. Right? Inam, you're even clearer from the beginning. Mereisha. Right? He says, look, in this case, when it's where's that phrase of nichnas l'rishus? That actually is our Mishnah, right?
No, it's right.
Oh, it was there? It was.
I don't think we've ever used nichnas.
Oh, it did. It says mishabasa. You're right, actually. That was the Ron's point, that it was basa, not nichtasa. But it says, this case of isha sheyesh lo chelek ba, so what is it? So it says that she was Baal Yershuso, this Yavama. How is she Baal Yershuso and still not his wife? Right? So the Idolo Kaddish, my Nigmaralo. If there was no Kiddushin, right, what does it mean? What does it mean? Basa Yershusa, Nigmaralo, etc. It's clear from this case, right, that we were talking about a woman who was a sister-in-law. He had a relationship, and then there was some other act that made it even more, sort of designated him and fully, and excluded the other brother. Okay, so clearly we were talking about a case that there was Mamar, and that can help us explain how it is that Rabbi Eliezer says that one brother is in a position, even though there are two brothers, and in theory, the other brother could do it, but if one did Mamar, he's in that position. Okay? So now the Gemara says, Tifshat minei kashasaba Mamar. So therefore, you can learn from this. You can learn from this that it's a case of Mamar. Now, let's just finish this. But what is meant for Chashar Dvarim Kain Nedarim? What's Rabbi Akiva's response? Okay, once you say there's only one brother and it's Zika and it's Mamar, what's his response? So then, yeah, why can't he do Hafara? Diktani, Amar Rava Hachiktani. Yatamodesh Shein Chayavim Skila, Kinara Murasa. You would admit that if she would go to sleep with another man, that she wouldn't get stoned. It wouldn't be an act of adultery. Okay, so therefore, just like in other laws, she's not fully Mekudeshes, no matter how strong, how much there's a mitzvah here to do Yibum and there's a relationship. She's not fully Ashes Yish, so therefore he can't do Hafara. And that's actually the last line of our mission as well. He says the Yavama is not fully this man's wife the same way a normal woman is. And therefore, Rabbi Kiva says, I don't care how much you hold of Zika and Mama and the whole thing, unless it's really Ashes Ish, you cannot do Hafara. Okay, and we are now even more than adopted. It actually is interesting how quick some of these